behalf of Kerala Management Association, I extend a warm welcome to all of you, all of the distinguished guests, speaker, members, and participants gathered here for today's 18th edition of KMA InsightX series. We are delighted to have all of you with us this evening for an insightful discussion on the topic Free Trade Agreement with the European Union and Trade Negotiation with the USA, the road ahead. To invoke the blessings of Almighty, may I request everyone to kindly rise for the moment of silent prayer. Thank you. Please be seated. It is now my privilege to invite Dr. Anil Joseph, Chair, Management Week, Kerala Management Association, to deliver the welcome address for today's session. Dr. Anil Joseph is a respected professional and active leader within KMA who have initiated in organizing several knowledge-driven new initiatives for the management community. May I request Dr. Anil Joseph to kindly address the gathering.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Management Week Celebrations 2026, organized by the Kerala Management Association. For decades, KMA has stood as a premier institution dedicated to nurturing management excellence, leadership, and professional development. Through initiatives like Management Week, KMA continue to bring together industry leaders, professionals, academicians, and students to reflect on contemporary challenges and opportunities in management and leadership. The Management Week 2026 is being held from 8th March to 13th March, which was inaugurated on 8th March on Sunday by Srimati Priyanka G, IAS, Ernakulam District Collector at Management House in Panampalli Nagar, Kochi, marking the beginning of a week filled with insightful discussions, learning opportunities, and meaningful engagement. The celebration began with KMA Health Day, which featured a free health checkup camp in association with Medivision Diagnostics, along with an informative section on managing HS and pains, conducted with the support of Regional Sports Center, Kochi, and Medical Trust Hospital. The initiative reflected KMA's commitment not only to professional excellence, but also to well-being of the community. On 9th March, we had the privilege of hosting the KT Chandy Memorial Lecture, delivered by the renowned industrialist and visionary leader, Kochose Chitlapalli. His insights and experiences provided valuable perspectives on entrepreneurship, leadership, and the evolving business environment. As we gather today, we look forward to the Leader Insight session on the highly relevant topic, Free Trade Agreement with European Union and Trade Negotiations with USA, the road ahead. We are honored to have with us Dr. K.N. Raghavan, IRS, an eminent expert and former senior government official who will share his perspective on the opportunities, challenges, and strategic implication of global trade negotiations for India and its economy. In a rapidly changing global landscape, understanding international trade dynamics is crucial for managers, entrepreneurs, and policymakers alike. The Management Week celebration will continue with more engaging programs in the coming days. Tomorrow, 12th of March, we will host the KMA Young Minds program, which aims to inspire and empower the next generation of leaders. And finally, on 13th March, we will conclude the celebration with the Women Managers Conclave, a full-day event centered around the theme, Give to Gain, inciting leadership, collaboration, and the role of women in shaping the future of management. Management Week is not merely a series of events, it's a platform that promotes learning, networking, and the exchange of ideas that can shape better organization and a better society. Let us continue to engage, learn, and grow together through these enriching sessions. I would like to conclude with an inspiring thought. Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other, by John F. Kennedy. Thank you all, and I wish you an insightful and enriching session ahead. And once again, I have the duty to welcome each and every one, past president, the MC members, and other members of KMA and students who have come over there. Welcome for this program. And I would also like to introduce our chief guest today. And it is a great pleasure to introduce an eminent and dynamic personality, Dr. K.N. Raghavan IRS, an accomplished administrator, trade expert, and public servant with a distinguished career spanning multiple sectors including taxation, international trade, and export promotion. Dr. Raghavan completed his MBBS and was pursuing his postgraduate medical studies when he chose to join the prestigious Indian Revenue Service in 1990, beginning a remarkable journey in public administration. During his career, he served as Principal Commissioner of GST in Mumbai and also headed Customs and Directorate of Revenue Intelligence Formations in Kerala, playing a key role in strengthening tax administration and enforcement. Dr. Raghavan also represented India internationally, serving as the first secretary at the High Commission of India in Singapore, gaining valuable exposure to global trade and diplomatic engagement. He was a BCCI accredited umpire who reached the international panel and retired in April 2013 to focus on his growing responsibilities within the Indian Revenue Service. He has held leadership roles in several major institutions connected with India's commodity and export sectors. He served as the Executive Director of the Rubber Board of India and has also headed organizations such as the Tea Board of India and the Kerala State Rubber Marketing Federation. In addition, he served as the chairman of the Marine Products Export Development Authority and also chaired the International Rubber Study Group, reflecting his significant contribution to India's export and commodity services. Currently, he continues to contribute to India's export industry as the Secretary General of the Seafood Exporters Association of India. With his vast experience in taxation, international trade policy, and export promotion, Dr. Raghavan brings deep insight into the evolving global trade landscape. Today, he will share his perspective on the highly relevant topic, free trade agreement with EU and trade negotiations with USA, the road ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my proud privilege to welcome Dr. K. Raghavan and invite him to address us. Let us give a big round of applause to our chief guest.
Thank you, sir, for the warm welcome. We now move on to the presidential address. It is my honor to invite Mr. Algiers Khalid, Senior Vice President of Kerala Management Association, to deliver the presidential address. Mr. Algiers Khalid has been actively contributing to the growth of KMA, and we grateful for his leadership and guidance. May I request Mr. Algiers Khalid to kindly address the gathering.
Distinguished Speaker of the Day, Dr. K.N. Raghavan IRS, respected members of the Managing Committee, past President Mr. K.N. Shastri, esteemed members, student chapter members, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It is indeed a privilege to once again stand before you all, the August gathering of KMA. Today, I have the honor of addressing on behalf of our President, Mr. K. Harikumar, who is currently out of station. He conveys his warm greetings and best wishes to all members present this evening. This also gives me a wonderful opportunity to acknowledge the excellent programs and initiatives that KMA has been organizing this year under the able leadership of President Harikumar and our Honorary Secretary, Mr. Anil Verma. Over the past several months, KMA has continued its proud tradition of creating meaningful platforms for learning, dialogue, and leadership insights. Our weekly Leader X sessions have brought distinguished speakers to share perspectives on subjects of contemporary relevance. We also hosted with great success the Digital Summit and the annual Corporate Cricket Tournament in October. And in November, we had the new initiative of the finishing school of students for business school students. It was organized by Managing Committee member Abraham Olikal, who is sitting here officiating as a secretary on behalf of Mr. Anil Verma. And it all brought together management students, leaders from industry, professionals, and members of a wide, vibrant community. Most recently, we witnessed the 43rd Annual Management Convention, KMA 2026, which saw record participation and reaffirmed KMA's position as one of India's most vibrant platforms for management thought leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in the midst of our annual Management Week celebration. This year's Management Week is particularly special thanks to the thoughtful planning and energetic coordination of the chairman of the Management Week Committee, Dr. Anil Joseph, a highly respected structural engineer. We are witnessing 5 programs this week, perhaps for the first time in KMA's history. In earlier years, we usually used to have 3 or 4 maximum programs, but this year, the scale, the variety, and the impact have been significantly enhanced. The week began with the inauguration of the health camp and the KMA Verma Homes Scholarship Initiative for interns working on government projects, inaugurated by the district collector, as mentioned by Dr. Anil Joseph. On Monday, we had the memorial lecture session where the revered industrialist, Mr. Kochavasu Chitlapalli, spoke on human relations as a keystone for leadership, followed by a heartfelt remembrance of the Dayan of Kerala Management Movement, Professor K.T. Chandi, presented by past President Sunil K. Sakaria. Today's session continues this journey of ideas and learning. Tomorrow, our Young Minds Committee will host an engaging conversation where a young digital marketing entrepreneur will interact with professor, columnist, and international affairs analyst on emerging global perspectives. And finally, the Management Week will culminate with a grand finale on Friday, a full-day Women Managers Conclave at Taj Vivanta, Marine Drive. This program will bring together women leaders and professionals from diverse fields. And I must highlight that this event is being offered at a very nominal and subsidized registration fee, including lunch at Taj Vivanta for just 1,000 rupees to encourage wider participation. You will also get some takeaways for attending this program. Let me remind that gentlemen are also wholeheartedly invited for the Women Managers Conclave. Please hurry up and register for it. At this moment, I would like to place on record my sincere appreciation to the organizers who have made this week possible. Dr. Anil Joseph, Chairman of Management Week, Mr. Dilip Narayan, Program Committee Chair, Mr. Nivedit, Chairman of the Young Minds Committee, and Mrs. Meena Thomas, Chairperson of the Women Managers Conclave. Their dedication and teamwork truly reflect in a vibrant team spirit of KMA. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now come to today's topic, which is both timely and globally significant. Many of us grew up in an era when India had very high tariff barriers. In fact, in the late 20th century, tariffs in India sometimes exceeded 200%. Then came the historic economic liberalization of the early 90s, which transformed our economy, opened markets, and gradually integrated India into a global trading system. Over the years, successive governments worked steadily to reduce tariffs, encourage competition, and make Indian industry globally competitive. But today, we are witnessing an interesting paradox in the global economy. Some of the world's largest economies, which once championed free trade and globalization, are now moving towards higher tariffs and protectionistic policies to safeguard their domestic manufacturing and employment. To understand this shift, we must also look at the broader geopolitical context. After the Second World War, the United States emerged as a central pillar of the global economic and security architecture. The institutions such as the United Nations and the alliances such as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, played a key role in shaping the international order. Later, after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the world endured a period that many described as unipolar global order, with the United States exercising significant influence. Around the same era, the US dollar became the dominant global reserve currency, especially after the 1971 President Nixon's decision to suspend the dollar convertibility into gold at a fixed rate of US dollar 35 per ounce. This allowed the dollar to float freely and reinforced America's central role in global finance. These developments also coincided the period of rapid globalization. Manufacturing gradually shifted to low-cost economies, particularly in China and other parts of East Asia. While advanced countries focus increasingly on technology, innovation, and high-value industries, but over time, this model also created significant trade imbalances. And to truly understand the concern driving global trade negotiations today, we must also look at some simple economic numbers. The United States today has a per capita income of roughly 80,000 to 85,000 US dollars per person. Compare it with China, where per capita income is around 12,000 to 13,000 US dollars. And then compare it with India, where per capita income is still around 2,500 to $3,000. In other words, the average American citizen earns almost 30 times more than average you and me, and roughly 6 times more than the average Chinese citizen. This enormous purchasing power is what the United States, the largest consumer market, made United States the largest consumer market in the world. Naturally, countries across the world have structured their manufacturing and export strategies to serve this very large market. However, this has also created a situation where the United States have been running very large trade deficit. Today, the overall trade deficit of the United States exceeds $1 trillion annually. A significant part of this deficit comes from few major trading partners. With China alone, the deficit has been around $250 to $300 billion. With European Union, the deficit roughly about $200 billion. And even with India, where the per capita is only about 2,500 to 3,000, the US has a deficit of $40 to $50 billion. That means USA buy far more than what they supply to India. Now, when such large trade imbalances continues for years, they begin to influence domestic politics, industrial policies, and employment concerns. In many traditional manufacturing regions of the United States, factories closed down, jobs moved overseas, and the entire industrial town struggled to reinvent themselves. Cities that were once global manufacturing hub, like Detroit in the automobile industry, experienced economic decline as production gradually moved to lower cost economies in the Far East, making it a ghost city. Therefore, when political leaders speak about bringing manufacture back, protecting domestic industries, or imposing reciprocal tariffs, it is often a response to the economy and social pressures. Whether one agrees on these policies or not, they are shaping the new global trade landscape. And this is precisely why India's trade deal with European Union and ongoing negotiation with the United States are so important today. These agreements will influence our export competitiveness, our industrial growth, our supply chains, and the opportunities available to Indian businesses in the years ahead. To help us understand these developments, we are fortunate to have with us today an extremely distinguished speaker. Dr. K.N. Raghavan has served as Customs Commissioner, the Principal Commissioner of GST in Mumbai, and earlier as the First Secretary of Commerce at the Indian High Commission in Singapore. During the tenure of current External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar as then Indian High Commissioner to Singapore. They were colleagues at that point of time. He is also a respected author and well-known international cricket umpire. Perhaps this unique combination of experience gives him what we might call the hawk eye perspective. Like an experienced cricket umpire, Standing behind the stumps, he can perhaps tell us whether the next delivery in global trade negotiations will be an in-swinger or an out-swinger, or perhaps even a cleverly disguised googly. Ladies and gentlemen, I am confident that Dr. Raghavan's insight today will help us, all of us, better understand the road ahead for India in global trade negotiation and what it could mean for businesses, industries, and our economy. It is now my great pleasure to invite our distinguished speaker, Dr. K.N. Raghavan, to the podium. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for your inspiring words. Ladies and gentlemen, the subject for today's session is extremely significant as India continues to strengthen its global trade. To share his valuable insight, we have with us eminent expert in international trade and policy. It is my privilege to invite our chief guest, Dr. K.N. Raghavan, IRS. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Algiers, for the wonderful words of introduction. I wish I could, even as an umpire, I couldn't distinguish whether the next delivery will be an in-swinger or an out-swinger. So, I don't think any umpire can do that till the ball is actually delivered. But then, it is always good to watch from the sidelines and analyze things. And also, a wonderful thing about cricket is that you can always predict and then say, what could have happened if something had happened like this? Like if Sanju had hit a century, what would have happened? Would he have been happier, or are we happy enough for him now? I think we are happy enough for him now. Anyway, thank you very much. I know it's a Wednesday evening. You have been having a series of lectures, so it's indeed heartening that so many of you are turned up for a topic as dry as free trade agreements. The speakers before me, both Dr. Anil and Mr. Algiers, made my job easier by speaking about the context of the free trade agreements. I would just give a brief overview in the sense that we had embraced a policy of protectionism after independence. It is a response to what we had suffered during the colonial rule. Our raw materials were taken abroad and we became a market for finished goods. Dadabhai Nauroji wrote about the poverty and un-British rule in India. We were impoverished as a result of that. So we looked upon everything foreign as a potential source of danger and colonialism. So this shaped our mindset. So high tariff, protectionism, probably import substitution. So these were the watchwords when a person like me grew up in the 70s. High tariffs, as high as 100, going up to 200. Even income tax rates were 90% during those times. So that used to be the norm. But then it had its own problems. We suffered the effect of two oil shocks, 73 and again in 90. And finally, we reached a situation where we didn't have money to pay for our imports. We had to pledge gold. Not only did Bank of England ask for us to pledge gold, they wanted that the gold should be kept in their vault. They didn't trust it. It was the year I joined service, 1990, and that was probably the worst year for Indian economy. So we'll never forget that. Fortunately, we recovered after that. We recovered well, and today we are the fourth largest. If you go by the total capacity of the economy or the GDP terms, we are the fourth largest. And if things go as planned, we will become the third largest by the end of this decade. Now, why do people focus on global trade? If you remember, Japan and South Korea were the two countries that was battered at the end of Second World War. There was nothing remaining, but they grew fast. China was nowhere till the 1970s, till the 1980s rather, till the great helmsman Mao Zedong was alive. China was nowhere as an economic power. They all grew very fast. They could wipe away all their financial and economic problems, wipe away the stigma of poverty, only because they had an export-led growth. They all grew by more than 10% because they catered to a global market. However big your domestic market is, if you have to grow fast, you have to grow well, you'll have to focus on the global market. It was something we failed to do. It was something we failed to understand, something we failed to comprehend. In our early days, all our exports were tea, coffee, spices, oil seeds, cotton. Then gradually, it was only towards the turn of the century that we thought about exporting outside. And even at that point, we were more worried about protecting our industries. When US set up the various global institutions in the post-World War, post-Second World War phase like the United Nations, World Bank, IMF and all that, for global trade they had something called the GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. It's something which always viewed with suspicion because US wanted to have a system which was free trade. And we thought free trade is going to be harmful for us because all the cheap goods from abroad will come here and our people will not be able to produce anything and we will become a market for their produce. And its successor WTO also. So we were the leader of the less developed countries, what you call the global south or the third world or the LDCs, who always opposed any move that US will bring in. The result that the functioning of WTO fairly came to a standstill. So, but the only good thing that happened because of WTO was that this MFN clause, that which you have one rate for the commodity across the globe. If you are importing this watch, if the rate of duty is 100%, it will be 100% for all countries unless you have a preferential trade agreement. That was decided. What Trump has now sought to do is that you change. If it is India, it is 15%. If it is somebody else, it is something else. That was never possible. With the MFN, all nations were treated at par. So this was one of the good things that happened thanks to GATT and WTO. I'm just going ahead of what it is. But then we started looking at global trade right from the turn of the century. If you look at it, we had a total trade of 103 billion, 60 billion imports, 43 billion exports in 2000. By 2010, we had grown to 528 billion. Again, our imports are more than exports, which is only natural because we had to import petroleum products. By 2020, we had moved further to 740 billion. Now today, we are at 1,700 billion. But there is one catch here. Whatever was set up to 2020 was only the merchandise goods. Now when you say about our total trade, we include services also. So when it comes to merchandise trade, our total trade is around 1,157 and the balance is a trade in services. We still have a deficit. Even when we account for the surplus that we have for services, we still have an overall deficit so far as global trade is concerned, which is around slightly less than $200 billion. It's a source of worry, yes, but not for an unusual worry because we still have to import all our petroleum products. Until and unless we are able to get domestic source of energy, this will continue for some time. But what has changed is that we had to shed the cloak of protectionism somewhere or the other. It started in a gradual way. Free trade agreements, as you say, allows export and import of goods duty-free. So if you have an agreement with a country X, you can send your goods to country X and it will be cleared without any customs duty. Similarly, goods from country X can come to your country without any duty. So there are some safeguards like the rules of origin. Now, if I had to export to country X and let's say India has an agreement with Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka can only send those goods which are produced there. So it's called the rules of origin. You cannot bring something from Thailand, repack it and send it here. There has to be an increase in value. There also has to be a change in the tariff heading at the 4-digit level. So some safeguards are kept to see that there is no misuse of the provisions of the free trade agreement. So for the free trade agreement, we were a very late entrant. Our first agreement was with Sri Lanka at the turn of the century. We had one with Afghanistan. Then we had the first import one with Thailand in 2004. The first major one that we signed was with Singapore in 2005. We had one with South Korea and Japan. 2011 it stopped. We had a SAFTA, South Asian Free Trade Agreement, which you know how effective SARC is, so it didn't mean much. One with the South American countries called the Mercosur, again a small one. So we are always very hesitant to get into free trade agreements. Even the BJP, which came to power in 2014, initially had this thing of Swadeshi. So they also used to look up with a lot of suspicion and skepticism about having free trade agreements. But somehow that has undergone a sudden change. Right about 2020, we started realizing that we need to export more. I was working in the government at that point, and I remember the Commerce Secretary then, a person called B.V.N. Subramanian, who is presently the Chief of Niti Aayog. He used to have meetings once in a fortnight, and he used to call what is the scoring rate, because he wanted the exports to proceed at a particular pace so that you will cross 400 billion. 400 billion was a target kept, and you're all happy when it crossed 400 billion for the first time. So this is small steps forward, but very firm steps. So we are slowly taking these steps forward. But most important thing was that we want access on equal terms. Now let's come to EU. Once, if the largest players in the global trade market are China, obviously they have exports of around 3.7 trillion. Our exports, merchandise and other one put together is only in the region of 700 or close to 800 billion. They have 3.7 trillion. US has got 3.2 trillion, but then their imports are more than 4 trillion, which is why, as Mr. Algier said, they have a deficit of close to 1 trillion. Germany has a small trade surplus, but others are all in the region of much less. We are number 11 so far as a global ranking in the overall trade is concerned. Then when we come to EU, EU is unique in that 26 countries have come together to have a common currency and common customs laws. So basically it is as if you are exporting to one customs territory. And EU is significant in that EU has a total trade volume of 10 trillion. Their exports are 4 trillion and imports are 6 trillion, which means you're gaining entry into a market on equal terms with others, where the total purchase capacity of import goods is 600 billion. And what do we export to EU right now? 75 billion. So this is a huge quantum step, the significance of which has not been fully realized. There were some articles in the newspapers and all that, but the sort of market access that we are going to get in EU is humongous. It's the largest single buying in this thing. If you look at it, US buys 4 trillion. These people are buying 6 trillion. So about 50% more than what US buys as imports is bought by EU. And we have a lot of exports going to EU. Our major item of export to EU is machinery and electrical appliances. We export somewhere around 16 billion. And what is our annual capacity of import? 2 trillion. Where is 16 billion? Where is 2 trillion? So the whole market is opening up to us. So what has happened is that during the negotiations, EU and India decided that 97% of the tariff lines, which is basically the customs tariff lines, which accounts for 99.5% of India's exports, would be duty-free. 70% would be with immediate effect. Another 20% will be with effect from, in a phased manner, the duties will be eliminated, and the balance there will be a phased reduction of duties. So we are getting access to the entire EU market with there will be no tariff barriers at all for most of the commodities. At least for the commodities that we are exporting in larger quantities, there will be absolutely be no tariff barriers. So when you look at it sector-wise, I said about machinery, 16 billion we get opening for a market. Right now there is a duty of up to 12%. If with 12% duty we are able to export 16 billion, with no duty we should be able to export much more. Take the case of apparels. About 8 billion is our overall total exports right now. I'll have to check the figures. Apparels is about 7.2 billion. The capacity of market 260 billion. Seafood, where I am working at present, last year we exported 1.1 billion. Capacity of EU market is 55 billion. So if you take every sector, you find that EU has a huge appetite. And this is a real significance as far as merchandise trade is concerned. Last year, we know that US imposed a tariff of 50% on Indian goods. The India's largest exports, at least in the area of seafood, goes to US. Out of $7.5 billion worth of seafood we export, 2.7, almost 40% go to US. We thought, what will we do? Commerce Ministry helped to get registration for 100 new units. Exports to EU increased by 50% in a short span of 8 to 9 months. So this is the appetite that EU has. So in all these sectors where we have this, in all the sectors where we are exporting to EU, you are going to get a huge opening as far as the market is concerned. So this will be in the area of gem and jewelry, plastics, apparels, chemical, machinery and tools, all these sectors where we are currently exporting in huge numbers and others who want to come in also. It provides a huge opportunity for us. And what are we giving in return? We have to give something in return. Good news is that wines and spirits will become cheaper. What used to be 100, it's a good news. it will become 30 to 40. But I still don't understand why we have to peg it at 100% plus. You can have it at a reasonable rate. So that comes down. But that apart, we are bringing down the duty on luxury cars. EU, you know, has got a huge automobile manufacturing potential, capacity, but we are bringing it in a phased manner to nil for luxury cars, not for the small and middle segment, which probably India is manufacturing. So we are trying to take care of the interest of the domestic industry also there. Then the other items which come from there are the medical equipments, machinery. You know, Germany is the leader in many of these things. Aircraft, you have the Airbus coming. So all these industries also get the benefit of duty reduction on that. So with EU, what we find is that we get access to a huge market. What is the advantage for EU? I read up there this thing. They said, we are getting access to a market of 1.5 billion. So when they look at it from their side, straight away at one go, they get access to a market of 1.5 billion, which is growing. We grow at almost 7% annually GDP. So that we are one of the fastest growing large economies in the world. So EU gets that access, whereas we get access to a huge market. Now this is about merchandise trade. An important element in the EU FTA is on the services element. Now we all know how difficult it is to get a visa to EU. You want to go to EU for business purpose, you have to wait a lot. Now, under the FTA, which has to be approved by EU, or rather it just go through the process of approval, they already signed it. For business purposes, you will get temporary visa and temporary stay permits also. For business, for intra-corporate transfers, and for contractual employment. Can you think of something better than that? EU as a market has gently been closed. You want to go there are lots and lots of restrictions. Now even for people appointed on contract for any of these things, your movement across will be very easy. And this is one thing which will help the state of Kerala in a big way, because we have a lot of people going and working in various parts of the world. So more than the merchandise trade, which of course we will benefit, because we have our, in addition to marine, we have oleoresin trade, we have the carpets, we have the rubber mats, and apparels, which will find a bigger market in EU. But the export of manpower also will get a huge fillip. Interestingly, we have also got an opening for traditional Indian medicine. Probably because they're given something for the traditional Chinese medicine, we got an opening for traditional Indian medicine also. So this is one of those agreements where we have got whatever we had dreamt of. It is not always that this happens. There have been a lot of arguments back and forth, but on paper, tariffs have been brought down so that we get a level playing field. For example, in the area of seafood, for the basic duty was around 4%. It could go up to 26% for some items. It all comes back to nil. So if we could sell 1.1 billion when there is duty of 4 to 26% and it's a market of 50 billion, how much will we be able to send when it comes down to zero? We should at least double or triple it. So that is a potential that EU FTA offers for each of the segments. So for those of you who are in the business or looking at opportunities or thinking about having conducting business or moving to EU, well, there are a lot of openings on the anvil. But let me tell you, there's a small catch. Catch is not in the agreement. Catch is in the EU bureaucracy. I'm a former bureaucrat, so I know what people generally think about bureaucrats, but we are no match for EU. They can create jalebis and jalebis and jalebis by having new clauses and particular regulations coming in. So this is one thing that ministry has to be extremely guarded against, because the EU bureaucracy can act as a non-tariff barrier. Second, EU is very focused on sustainability. So if they find that any of our practices, any of our procedures are unsustainable or make the world a worse place to live in, they'll come down very harshly on it. So these two things one should always bear in mind. One is EU bureaucracy. Second is practices should be sustainable. We have focus on ESG and other things, but then we will need to have more focus. Companies which are interested in doing business with EU should have more focus on sustainable practices, having it. And finally, you find that practices may vary from one country to other, because after all, EU is a conglomeration of 26 countries. Some are very good, like or very rich and prosperous, like you have the at one end of the spectrum, you have Germany, France, and probably Netherlands. Well, then it goes to many other smaller countries, not in the same stage of development or with the same levels of integrity as well. So those are factors that people have to look at it. But when I speak to exporters to EU, they say that yes, we know how to manage the system because our importers there, our buyers are able to take care of it. We are fortunate that EU faced a problem. Around the same time, we faced a problem because US gun for both India and EU together. Like they put that 50% tariff on us, they gun for EU, they almost disabled the NATO, which offered a huge protective umbrella, and they were criticizing the European nations at every instant. So much so that we were able to find common ground and move ahead very fast. In fact, watching from the outside, I was earlier in government, but because I go these days many times to the Ministry of Commerce, I could see the pace at which, I could see the speed with which they were working, because they could see the goal in sight. When you're running a race and you see the tape in front of you, and suddenly it starts becoming nearer, you get that extra ounce of adrenaline and energy to reach the tape. That is the manner in which the ministry and the officials from both sides worked to reach the goals of 26 January. They had invited the EU president as a chief guest for a Republic Day parade, and we could sign that agreement on that day. Now it has to be ratified by the various member nations. Probably that will take around 8 to 10 months in a very optimistic manner, or in the rather EU pace, it will take around 12 to 14 months. But hopefully by next March, the agreement will be ratified by all countries, and then the benefit of this will start ticking in. Now this was the reason why our Prime Minister and Commerce Minister called the mother of all FTAs. We are getting such a huge market access at one go to a market which is varied, which is a market which is developed, and is a market which will keep growing. So we should make the best possible use of it. Now, second element is the more controversial, or the one which has been more in the news, our discussions with US. We didn't have a FTA with US. In fact, US has FTA with very few countries. EU has about 40 agreements with 80 countries, whereas US till date has about agreements with only 20 countries. Some of them are in the Central American area. Some of them are in North America, that's the US, Canada, Mexico. They have agreements with Singapore, they have agreement with Australia, and then they have agreement with some of the countries in the Middle East, like Jordan, Israel, Bahrain, and all that. So US has not been very keen on FTAs because they didn't have a customs duty there. And most of the countries were wary of them. No, we will not have an FTA with China, for the obvious reason that if you have an FTA with China, well, then we will be flooded with Chinese goods. So for the same reason, not many countries are keen on having an FTA with USA, except for some strategic reasons. Now, a big change in our approach towards trade negotiations with the US happened right after Trump assumed charge in the second term. Otherwise, he used to talk about a trade agreement in very vague general terms. But after PM Modi, he was the first leader from Asia to visit Trump in the White House after he took charge, if my memory serves right. There itself, they announced that we will start the work for a bilateral trade agreement. It is not a free trade agreement. It is very clear. US does not want a free trade agreement. They want a bilateral trade agreement, which means that there's a framework under which you operate. They'll get some preferential rates of duty, but it will not be free. That was very evident because the term used is bilateral trade agreement. He said that we'll work towards it, so there was an urgency. And probably it was because either during the meeting, President Trump himself said that he will be bringing in the tariff, or because our ministry, External Affairs Ministry, and the embassy had briefed Prime Minister that this is one area where the President will not budge, so we will have to accept towards having a trade agreement. And when the President can keep changing his positions very frequently, very dramatically, then it is always better to have an agreement in place so that he cannot move outside the frame of, he can do anything, but normally it is more difficult to move out of the framework that he himself has approved. So this was the idea under which India decided to go ahead with an agreement with the US. US, as I said, had no duties except for some items where they kept a cap and other things, but otherwise most of the items could be imported without any customs duty they had. Of course, for trade purposes, countervailing duty if they felt that there were increased subsidies being given to the export product, or anti-dumping duty if they felt that the price were artificially kept low and being dumped in the US market. Those measures were being used very liberally by the US Department of Commerce. But suddenly, after Trump kept on talking about tariff through the election campaign, after his victory also, before he assumed charge, he talked about tariff, but no one actually thought that he will bring in something called reciprocal tariff, because it sounded so outlandish, so outrageous, and it turned everything that US has been trying to teach us all these years about MFN status, about free trade and all that. But he brought it. In the month of, I think it's sometime in the first week of April that he came and announced that each nation will have a different rate, and he fixed 26% as a tariff rate for goods being exported. It's a huge furore, upset. Almost all the nations are shocked and aghast. But fortunately, he brought it down to 10% and said, I'm giving a 3-month window. And then he started a series of rapid negotiations with everyone. We were already way ahead so far as the BTO was moving. So we used to check up occasionally with the ministry. They said, no, things are moving fine, don't worry. Within the 3-month window, we'll be able to conclude. So this optimism was there. June, July, August. But sometime towards the end of July, the lead negotiator said, there are some issues, so I think there will be a delay. You'll have to brace yourself up for some bad news. So we knew that there will be some bad news, so it was only a question of the extent of the bad news that, taking extra, I'll take just 3 more minutes to complete it. So because it is 7:15 is the time given to me, I don't want to overshoot it. So what are the extent of the bad news is what we were wondering. Because he had kept on announcing through his Truth Social post that I concluded this rate to this country, this rate to this country. Young countries concerned were not saying anything, but he said that, well, this is fixed for this country. They'll be buying so much amount of goods with Japan, with Korea, with Malaysia, with many countries. He fixed these rates arbitrarily after some discussions. Anyway, one fine morning he told that the rate will be 25% for India. Even as we were recovering, we were just, when you get a body blow, what you have? You just go to the ropes. And as you take a deep breath, we got an even bigger blow when you said that extra 25% for buying Russian oil. God, are we the largest buyers of Russian oil? No. Are we the only buyers of Russian oil? No. But we were the one who punched with Russian oil. And it became 50%. So at 50%, our exports became uncompetitive. So all the hard work done by all the exporters through these years has suddenly come to naught because he kept the tariff at 50%. And it lasted for a long time. And you look at these sectors which are exporting the maximum to US. You have the apparels and textiles, you have the chemicals, you have the gem and jewelry, you have the marine products. These are all labor intensive. They're all labor intensive sectors. He knew that was the area where we will get pain the most. So he was sending a very sharp lesson to us saying that you don't mess around with me. For whatever reason, I don't know. We can only hazard a guess as to what was it really annoyed Mr. Trump. And every other week he will say, yes, I will be looking at it again. So there was hope on the horizon, but the next week he will say, no, Prime Minister is a good friend, but then I will not budge on it. So these contradictory signals used to come. So whenever we used to go to Ministry of Commerce, they say, we don't know. Actually, what our insider said was that everything was finalized and the file had actually gone to President's desk. This is just hearsay. Don't quote me and say he said. I didn't see it, but this is something I heard. That it went to President's desk, giving him this thing between 16 to 19%. President can decide. Not 15, not 20, something between that. He just took it aside and said, let it remain there. And then he said 25%. And then he increased to 50%. It was when it was kept aside that we got the warning that please brace yourself for some bad news. But then these things came in. So when it became 50%, what do? We are all told to look for alternate markets. But where are the alternate markets? If you suddenly decide you will start exporting to EU or you start exporting to another country, they are not going to open your arms and welcome. There's a process involved. There are sellers in that market. And you have to go through the whole procedure. But somehow, most of the industries survived this period, held partly by the ministry. Government also came to the rescue with a moratorium. Government also gave additional credit facilities, something called the credit guarantee scheme for exporters. CGSC came in so that everyone could get a 20% extra on their credit lines. So government came with some measures so that the impact was minimized to some extent. If you look at it, year on year, this year exported more to US than last year, despite this 50% tariff. One thing was that there was front loading because people knew there was something going to come, so a lot of people purchased in bulk. At least in seafood, I know, first quarter up to July, a lot of people purchased early because they knew that something might happen. So this might have happened in other sectors also. There was definitely a slump during the period from August to December. But when we had the deal with EU, there was a lot of skepticism in the remarks of President Trump at that point. But within a week, he called up and he said, we are bringing it down to 18. So what should we do? Do we take it or do we leave it? So this was the position of Indian government at that point. Exporters badly wanted to re-enter the market or to cling on to that market. Most of them were on the verge of being pushed out because there were competitors coming in. And once you lose space to your competitor, you're not going to get it back. It'll take at least 4 or 5 years of hard work to get it back. So with all that, government accepted that, yes, we'll take it at 18%. But then we said they wanted some benefits at their side, which were given. I'll come to that. And that is how the framework, the joint statement on the framework for the interim agreement as a precursor for the BTA came in. So what we have reached is not an agreement. This is just a broad framework. What we gave in is that for some items we are permitting duty-free entry. We are not getting duty-free entry except for gem and jewelry and generic pharmaceuticals and 1 or 2 small items. Most of the other items like marine, apparel, leather, footwear will go under the 18%. Something will be in between. So this is how the tariff stands. But for some of the US items, we are allowing duty-free. But what we have taken care is that they said that none of the agri products will get the benefit of tariff reduction if they are grown or produced in India, so as to protect the Indian farmer. 2, dairy segment has been kept out of this. We will not be able to compete with the US dairy sector, so dairy segment has been kept out of it. And 3rd, genetically modified seeds or the plants or the crop will not be allowed into a country. So 3 basic conditions we have kept, that this will not be part of any tariff reduction, so that those segments are ring-fenced in this tariff. Then there's a condition to say that we will buy 500 billion worth of goods, which again is not very difficult because you buy aircraft from Boeing, that itself will come to 100 billion or 150 billion. With the other this thing, you'll easily get that. So 500 billion, so it sounds huge in one this thing. Our purchase of services and other these things, if there is something major coming up, over a period of 4 or 5 years will come to 500 billion. So that is not something that we should lose sleep over. But the critical point here was that he said that India will not buy oil from Russia. If you go by newspaper reports, we haven't stopped purchase of oil, but then Mr. Trump brought it down to 25%. At least that extra penal tariff for buying oil from Russia has been scrapped for now. So the tariff was brought down to 25%, and we are looking forward to it coming to 18% when suddenly the US Supreme Court decided that he did not have any power, or rather the action that he took under the IEEPA, International Emergency Economic Powers Act, was actually illegal. So the entire tariff went through the door. So what do? We are agreed on 18%, and the entire structure that he had built up has suddenly collapsed. Because through the Section 122 of the Trade Act, he has brought in a duty of 10%. He can go to a maximum 15% for 6 months. So there is some amount of confusion. So what we have done is to keep quiet, which is the wisest thing to do when we are handling a person like the present US president. We have kept quiet. We did not send a delegation for further talks, and like every other country, we are waiting for the situation to become clear. But as an individual, as a person who has been involved with exporters who do a lot of exports to US, I feel that we should have a trade agreement with US. Whatever be the structure of that, we should protect the segments, like we should ring-fence those segments which are dear to us, which need to be protected. But at the same time, we cannot subject our exporters to be so much of the mercy of the unpredictable nature of a couple of people at the higher positions in US. I'm putting it because you cannot have a situation where the decision taken. Now, if you have an act of war, it is different. You know where you stand. But then whimsical decisions should not affect the livelihood of a fisherman here or a farmer there or somebody else there. What did they do wrong? And immediately the banks also come around saying that, yes, your turnover is lesser, so we cannot give you extra credit. Banker is right in his own way, your turnover is less, so we cannot give extra credit. But it is not because of any bad business decision. So it throws the entire thing into a spin. So this has been a great lesson for the industry. For the export industry, it has been a great lesson. For the Ministry of Commerce, it has been a great lesson. We have understood that we need to have a trade agreement, bilateral trade agreement, having the broad framework so that we are not pushed to situations where there are extremes in action or rather in the market access come in. We should be guaranteed a reasonable certainty of doing business. The best part of doing business with the US was the clarity and certainty. We knew where you stood. You knew what the tariff was. Everything was transparent. The rule of law was there. You cannot say it with such confidence with any other country, including India. But in US, it wasn't. It was, as people who do business in USA, it was very easy to do it. But suddenly, it had become very unstable. So you need the basic framework of an agreement. That is one. Second, you should not be afraid about imports coming to a country. We are reached that stage where we can have some of the imports, provided you take the key sectors away from attack or by increased imports from a country. If you protect the key sectors and the key farmers or the key players there, then there is no reason why we should not have an agreement. And finally, I feel that when we are having zero duty, we are making a statement, yes, we are not afraid of anyone. We will be able to stand up. If some sectors need protection, we should say, yes, they need protection. But overall, there is no winner or loser. A guy who puts a protection, like Mr. Algiers said, it has come a full circle where the biggest votaries of free trade are now becomes the voice of protectionism, which is a sad thing. But that's the way it is working. So I'll stop here. I'll conclude by saying that what we have gained with EU has been a tremendous achievement while we have been able to work our way through the difficulties posed by US and survive. When COVID came, he said that the most important thing is surviving this period. So with US also, we went through a similar situation, but we have managed to survive. And I am sure that there will be better days ahead. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'll take it.
Thank you very much, sir, for the extremely insightful and thought-provoking address. The floor is open for Q&A session. If you have any questions, kindly raise your hand and wait for the microphone. Please introduce yourself before asking the question.
I can only speak from the experience of the sector I am working in, because each sector would have done in a different way. Like in seafood sector, what happened was that most of the people had developed relationships over a period. And these are contracts which are running contracts, annual contracts. And so when the tariffs came in, some segments which could not afford the tariffs, at least in seafood where the shrimp, would have moved to cheaper sources. They would have gone to chicken for or beef for their source of protein. But others, what they did was that, at least for this sector, they imported, kept it in customs bonded warehouses, and took out as per their requirements. So what happened was that it was at 50%, they will take out what is required, pay 50% and utilize it, so that the duty incidence was lesser. Suddenly when it came down, there were 5 days at 0%. This is something that happened. I know some of the exporters, people who are doing business in the US will agree. For 5 days between from 50 it came to 25, 25 it had to come down to 10. For 5 days, from 25 it went to 0, and from 0 it went to 10. So a lot of people cleared during that window of 10, 0. Now they stabilize at 10. So this is how it operated. But buyers faced a problem. Some of the industries have taken a call saying that we will not bear the incidence of the tax. Tax has to be paid by the buyer. So that succeeded in some industries, like seafood. I was told that it reasonably succeeded. They would have brought down the prices a bit. That might have happened, but they did that. With some others, they would have shared the tax incidence also. But where the incidence has been borne by the buyer, in case there's a refund, you see what will happen. The person who paid the duty will get the full refund. So he will be a happy person at the end of it. There's a lesson in that you should not short circuit the established legal procedures, however powerful you might be. Because ultimately the Supreme Court came in, and despite the judges being handpicked, they upheld the rule of law, which is a great message across the world that you cannot afford to short circuit the procedures and rule of law.
Sir, I would like to ask you a question. Is there a mechanism in the Ministry of Commerce to kind of monitor the past FTAs that we have signed, like we signed with Sri Lanka, then with Singapore? Over the years, how was our performance in thanks to the FTA, or some kind of a monitoring of the effectiveness?
Yes, there is. These are being constantly re-evaluated. But with FTAs, you have also got to understand that even though it's a trade agreement, there is something more than trade. There's also a relationship between the nations. Like I said, for EU, even though it says about trade, it happened only when both India and EU faced a problem vis-a-vis US. So that environment was conducive for doing it. Like we have this thing with Sri Lanka. If you have to change it, there might be some disadvantage. If you have to change it, you have to look at the larger strategic security perspective also. So that often comes as a stumbling block. Like we have one with Afghanistan, which was signed in 2003. I don't know how it is lasting now, given the government there and what you're having now. Like you're a SAFTA, which SARC. Now, it will not be operational now for obvious reasons, because you don't allow anything to come from Pakistan. So these things keep on changing. And there are regular reviews also of all these. And there are periodic reviews, 5-year review, in which any of those new items can be introduced. Those things happen. If the trade says that, well, this particular item needs to come into that, we have started producing this also, should be like in Thailand FTA, there are some products that seafood industry wants. So we have made a pitch for that. So in the next round, hopefully it will be taken up. So that constant monitoring goes on. But then changing this thing is a more difficult thing, because ultimately it becomes a political decision. It's not purely a commercial decision. That is how it happens.
What will happen after 6 months? Like, will there be any further round of negotiation?
With European Union?
No, with the US. Because
yes,
now
there will be negotiation, because as it is, the negotiations are continuing. We are only not sent this thing now because of the uncertainty. Because US itself, the president initially said that, and now Scott Bessent has said that they'll be increasing to 15%. And they'll be bringing back the tariff. How it will be done is not known. So many people have postulated various theories. So unless we know for sure what is the basal rate, how do you negotiate? You are negotiating for something preferential.
Yeah, right.
Unless you know what is the basal rate. If it is 10, can you negotiate for 18? You will not do that.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
Yes.
So that is the confusion that is prevailing right now.
Okay.
And plus they are busy with the war also. So when things cool down, probably there will be a round. Definitely it is the intention of government to have a trade agreement.
Okay.
So that the framework remains there. You can always improve on it. Like I said, you can always add items. You can always take away items. So this can be done. But it will help India's cause. Particularly at the strategic level, we are coming closer to US on many things. Correct. So having an agreement there would certainly help. We are having an agreement with Israel also. The negotiations have started for that, incidentally.
Okay. And what is the current rate, sir? Like, is it 10% or 15%?
As on today, it is 10.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it has changed after I came in here, but because we had a talk yesterday. Then it was said that the exporters themselves, because they know it, because for seafood at least, the exporter here is also the importer on record in US, because they deliver at the doorstep.
Okay.
So most of them export from here, they are the importers there, then they clear it, and then they have to pay the anti-dumping duty also, and then they deliver at the doorstep. So they know for certain. That's why I was saying a certainty about the 0%, because I know that some of them got the benefit of that. So it is 10% as of today.
Okay, sir.
Good evening, sir. I am Hari. I am in the shipping analysis for the past 38 years. And during my initial stage, that is during 1990s, the US as well as other tariff was much higher than what now it is. And what I could see is that US is still going down from that time and struggling to recover. And do you think this war is helping them to recover and control take the control of the oil? Especially, then they have taken control of the Iran. Earlier, they wanted to take Iraq, and all those things are happening. And now the Saudis, to a certain extent, they are friendly with them. But is it going to be a steady growth if it is under their control?
See, they took control in the 1950s when the Iranian Prime Minister nationalized Suez Canal and also nationalized the entire oil industry. So America and England came together and deposed him off and got the Shah in. That happened at that point of time. The wars, I also agree, are being brought largely for oil, whatever be the other reasons. Oil is the key. Whether it is in Venezuela or in Iran, oil holds the key on that. Personally, I would like a world without wars. There's no doubt about it. Wars serve only the purpose of certain industries within one country. The armament producing industries within certain countries are the only persons who benefit, while it brings in huge calamities. And maybe there is some money to be made in reconstruction also, again, which goes to your fuel firms. So war will definitely not the answer for any of the problems. I am very clear on that. It doesn't help anyone. As per some report that I read, every day it costs $900 million for US to fight this war. And ultimately, what is the gain? Unless they are able to control oil is a question that will be asked later on. So I don't think this will help US in any way. They had wars in Iraq, they had wars in Afghanistan, they had wars in Vietnam. So did it ultimately help their stature or their economy because of wars? So past history shows that it is extremely difficult through wars to gain control unless the people of the country are willing to cooperate, and which we are not so far seen. Despite all the obvious, or rather the statements about the protests and uproar of the people in Iran against the administration, which might be there given the nature of the administration, we have not yet seen any this thing of the current crisis being used, the current war being used to overthrow the government there. This is my very personal opinion, not of any organization or anyone, my very personal opinion. True. You take control of Venezuelan oil and you cut off oil to Cuba, so that you try to force the Cuban government to come down. So these sort of things are not in the long-term interest of any nation. This is how I feel. There are many methods for changing governments, and ultimately the people should decide who should govern them, not another country. Again, my opinion on that. Yeah. Anything? Yes, sir.
Just before I came, just flipping through the news, I got a news item. I did not know how to react. In fact, I'm asking you how to react. See, it says, as usual, the big man says that I promised when I got elected that I'm going to restart industry, etc. This thing. And it's the first major thing I've done is now. And it shows that he says, I'm starting a refinery which we have not done for 50 years. Now US is going to invest in a new refinery. And of all people, the shock I got was standing next to him was Mukesh Ambani saying that he's going to be the investor for that big investment in the US. I don't know how to react to it.
I also read the report that an Indian, I saw it as an Indian will start the biggest refinery in US. Very interesting news. At one level, it shows where US has reached and where the heights that India have reached. So we'll take away the individuals concerned. But if an Indian can be in US and start the refinery there, which no American is willing to or bold enough to do it, it shows that we have reached certain potential to do it. Let us take this thing in that. Sir, you want to ask something? No, that is why I said if this benefit is given for luxury cars, the phase duty elimination over 10 years is given for luxury cars. So this I think is a protective measure that has been taken on that. So if anyone feels that is being used as a rerouting this thing, government can act on it. So that will also, there is a broad rules of origin which says who can manufacture, what will be the conditions under which a product will be taken as being made, what is the value addition. But if, let's say for example, BYD or a Chinese company sets up a factory in EU and then they send it here, well then that's part of it. We'll have to accept that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for engaging questions and response. May I now invite our Senior Vice President, Mr. Algiers Khalid, to hand over a token of appreciation to our Chief Guest.
I think I'll request Vice Admiral to come and give contemporary Singapore.
As we come to the close of the engaging session, it is time to express our gratitude to all those who made this program possible. May I now invite Mr. Abraham Olikel, Managing Committee Member of Kerala Management Association, to deliver the vote of thanks.
It is my present duty to propose vote of thanks for this InsightX 18th edition. We Malayalis, we tend to hear a lot of news about these kind of agreements and all kind of new reforms in a very negative way over these years. Sir talked about GATT agreement, and later we had the ASEAN agreement. Also we had the globalization reforms have come in, and now that the new, which is not India specific, but is a global one he talked about today. So we hear a lot about in a very negative way. We come to these kind of reforms in the news, political parties shouting against. There's a lot of slogans, and what I'm trying to say is that we hear a lot of negative news. We are against GATT Karar. Not we, I'm saying that. We tend to hear such kind of news. We are against GATT. We used to be against GATT Karar. GATT agreement, and later ASEAN, also globalization effect. But we've kind of confused Mallus. Normally we get confused by hearing these kind of slogans and all that. but we really what the real story behind it and the pros and cons we get to know only from such eminent bureaucrats when they talk to us. And it is a wonderful session, sir. And talking about today's session, it is a global issue. But coming to Kerala specific, Kerala is a very small state. Ours is a buyer's market or a trader's market, we would normally call ourselves as. But with a lot of difficulties and challenges, we do little bit cultivation, little bit manufacturing, and little bit agriculture. With the new geopolitical issues and the trade tariff war, our life has become more miserable. But today, Sarah has explained us very well what is the real cause behind it. And thank you, sir. And sir is, Dr. K. Raghavan is a good friend of KMA. I myself have been hearing, sir, this is the third time in the same venue. Last year we had a wonderful session. I don't know, I think Vice President, Senior VP forgot to mention that because his leadership only we had arranged a leadership fireside chat between Dr. Raghavan and Dr. Venu IAS, our Chief Secretary of Kerala State. That was a wonderful session. I could only recall that they were talking about, they were classmates in their MBBS college, and later in the civil service also they were working together. And Dr. Anil Joseph mentioned more about service in the NOCA routes or in the customs and the ambassador position and all that. But I could also say that Dr. Venu was mentioning sir was instrumental in instrumental in taking up our the one and only medical college in Ernakulam. He was instrumental in nurturing that medical college. So thank you, sir. Thank you for coming and being with us and enlightening us with a very great subject. Thank you so much. And our senior VP had a great presidential address. Thank you so much. Dr. Anil Joseph is very busy with the Management Week celebration. Thank you for arranging this program. Thank you, past presidents, MC members, and esteemed KMA members, student members, and secretariat team. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, may I request everyone to kindly rise for the national anthem.